Hey there. You are listening to the Black Hat Loading Podcast, playing host to world-renowned ethical hackers and cybersecurity trainers. Black Hat Middle East and Africa is the answer to the region's thriving cybersecurity market. Join our conversations as we catch up with InfoSec leaders in an effort to continue winning the cyber war.
Welcome to another edition of the Black Hat MEA podcast series. Today's focus on cybersecurity and more specifically navigating risks in the digital age. We're thrilled to be joined by Suresh Sankaran, Group Head of Cybersecurity at Axiata Group. Thanks for joining us today. We're honored to have you.
Thank you, Philip. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, it's a pleasure and honor, and just kind of seeing your CV. You just got some really great experience, and our conference attenders and the listeners today are in for a treat. So just to share a little bit about Suresh's bio, he's the group head of cybersecurity at Axiata Group, Berhad, Malaysia, with responsibility for cybersecurity across the group, including operating subsidiaries. Prior to joining Axiata Group, Suresh worked in leadership roles for information and cybersecurity at several companies, including EY, Vodafone, etc. Notable amongst his tenure as a principal manager, security engineer for Vodafone Group, UK, where he was part of the leadership team who set up the global cyber defense capability for Vodafone. His professional interests focus on emerging technologies such as AI, quantum computing, etc. And his current projects include operationalizing of the Cyber Fusion Center, the Zero Trust Framework implementation, as well as enabling responsible use of capable AI for the group. In addition, he has served as a mentor for National COE under NASSCOM India, advising and mentoring startups in cybersecurity domain. Besides 20 plus years of experience in information and cybersecurity, Suresh holds multiple professional certifications, such as OSCP. Big thumbs up on that to see someone in management that has these type of certifications. That's you usually don't see that, but that's pretty amazing. SANS GCIH, AWS Solutions Architect, Professional, and the CCISO, etc. Certification, etc. So those are some pretty amazing certifications and well-rounded background that you have there, sir.
Thank you very much. I just try to be relevant. Let me put it that way.
Yeah. So what steps should a company take when developing a cybersecurity strategy?
Well, good question. And I think there is no one size fits all answer to this. But if I have to put a broad framework to it, any good cybersecurity strategy has to be aligned to the business strategy and the overall business vision in itself. And connected to that also the technology roadmap, because you have a business strategy. Now, the business strategy in today's times is more or less dependent on the technology roadmap connected to it. So what are the technology investments which will drive the business strategy ahead? So the cyber strategy will have to be linked to both the business and the technology roadmaps. It cannot be a silo. It cannot be an island on its own. It needs to be connected to both of these. That's the most important part of a good cyber strategy. Once that part is ironed out, the next step would be to have a sound, robust threat modeling in place to understand what are the current and emerging threats that the organization, that industry, and the connected industries. Because today an organization is not just on its own; it partners with various other organizations. There are alliances, partnerships, all kind of relationships in place. So I can't just say if I have to take Axiata as an example. So we are a telco group primarily who's now evolving into the digital business, whether it's fintech, digital bank, API ecosystem, so on and so forth. So one is the group in itself is becoming diverse. Second is we have partnerships with third parties who are into other industries. So when I build my cyber strategy, I need to look at that whole ecosystem, not just a group alone. Gone are the days when you just look at your organization or your enterprise or your group. You need to now look at the broader ecosystem, which is the supply chain or the partnership ecosystem, and take the whole ecosystem into play and say, okay, what are the emerging threats coming out in that space, and build a broad threat model, which will then help you define your strategy and the connected investments, so on and so forth. The third step broadly would be to have a view on what is your current maturity level or your current security posture. Now, that current security posture is like a moving goalpost in my view. That's not a fixed post where you started. Probably it depends on when you started the journey and where you are currently. You may be in the middle of the journey, you may be at the beginning of the journey. It's completely subjective. So I can't say that it will be the same for everyone. So it's important to do those range checks in between to see where you stand. And you can use a lot of tools. And my favorite is, like you said, because I went for the OSCP because I still have a leg pretty much deep into the tech space. And I don't think any CISO in today's time can say that they can just be a pure play management professional. They also have to be a tech professional at some level. So I regularly do red teaming within the group, and that's one of my favorite tools because nothing gives you a more realistic view of where you stand in terms of your posture. So red teaming can be a tool. You can do checklist assessments. You can do maturity assessments. You have a wide range of tools available. Whatever is your palatable one, go for it. And but make sure that there are those periodical check-ins, especially around the time when your strategy comes to an end and you're moving into a refresh kind of a phase. Once that's done, define the people, process, technology investments that needs to be made to meet your next 3, 5 years, whatever is the duration of the next strategy that you are defining. And last but not the least is link your outcomes to the business outcomes and the technology outcomes. If you don't build the linkage between the cyber outcomes with the business and the technology outcome, when you go and speak about that story to the boards and the executive leadership, you're missing out on an opportunity to make a relevant business case on why the organization needs to invest in cyber and not just use FUD as a tool to go sell.
Yeah, that's some great advice there, and still just you know, thinking about your technical background. And one of the things that I see, and one of the things I try to share with people, is the importance of understanding the offensive security side, that you understand the threat actor. And while not everyone has to be at your level, it's definitely, I think, something that management and leadership needs to understand how the threat actors
Absolutely.
work. Yeah.
Absolutely. I'll tell you what. See, I was an active red teamer probably back in 2005, 2006, till about, I would say around 2009, 2010. Beyond that, I've not been an active red teamer, but I've kept up to speed with what's happening in the offensive world. And obviously I have a soft spot for offensive, but what's benefited me is that thinking. How an offensive guy would think, how a threat actor would think, and that helps a lot when you're building your defenses. You go looking for soft spots, weak spots, which you typically won't look for in a conventional risk assessment. They don't come out in your conventional risk assessment because when you're thinking like an offensive guy, you're driven by the objective. You're not driven by the methodology. And I say this everywhere. People come and say, yeah, we've got pen testers. I'm like, pen testers, great. But offensive guys are a different breed. Offensive guys think different. Their methodology, their style, their attitude, everything is different. And having an offensive mindset at a CISO level, I personally think benefits a lot.
And what are some recommendations you'd have for your peers that are in management or CISOs? Because some of them don't have the time to go through the OSCP. Are there any kind of recommendations that you have that they could leverage to be stronger in this area, be able to develop some knowledge?
See, OSCP honestly was a personal goal. So I'm not gonna tell everyone to go and do OSCP. If you manage to do it, wonderful. It's a great journey that I've had. And guess what? I did it 2021. So I did it when I was completely out of hands-on and I was more into management. My suggestion or my two bits to my peers is you don't need to be an OSCP. You can still play around with a lot of simulations. There are enough simulators, enough hack in the box kind of setups available. I personally say play around with it, get a grip on what the threat actors of today are doing, how they are doing it, their TTPs, their tools, their IOCs, whatever you call it, or IOAs, whichever way you take it. But know their style. It's important to know their style. It's important to think like them, like the great old veteran Sun Tzu said, know your enemy. And it's important to know your enemy so that you can start defending against them. And your enemy unfortunately keeps evolving. We are cyber is one world where the enemy keeps evolving, probably in weeks or if not days. So it's important to have that foundation. Now, if you're not somebody who has an inbuilt aptitude to pursue offensive, I would say at least have one solid offensive guy in the team, guy or a girl, have a person in the team, because they bring that thought process to the whole functioning itself. And that's what I've always had, and it's worked wonders.
That's some great advice and something I constantly share. I've worked in organizations where people on the security team didn't know the difference between a vulnerability scan, a vulnerability assessment, a pen test, and a red team operation or adversarial emulation. They didn't know the difference between those. So it's something that I agree that is important that people understand in security, so they're able to, people underestimate sometimes what offensive security, and you take the whole realm, pen testing, red teaming, so forth, that how important that is of making sure all the defensive stuff you're doing is helping improve that security posture and the maturity.
Correct. I can't agree more, honestly.
So getting more into kind of the third party risks, what are your advice for company for managing third party security risks?
Interesting question. I think we are living in a world where suddenly supply chain attacks are like a buzzword. So it's a reality. And what's even bigger a reality is that the whole supply chain ecosystem has shifted. It's no more just data processing or document management, or those used to be the third parties probably a decade ago. If you look at third parties today, anybody and everybody is a third party. So because the level of digital integration that an organization or an enterprise goes through, and with the whole microservices architecture coming into play, and APIs are all over the place, anybody and everybody is a third party today. So it's important to understand that you can't boil the ocean. Trying to boil the ocean is not going to work here. The key things to do is have a view of what your third party ecosystem looks like. And 9 out of 10 times I see that a lot of organizations miss out on creating that the profile or the portfolio of what my third party ecosystem looks like. Start with that, build that third party ecosystem, then use I mean, it's a cliche term, use a risk based model, which is essentially which will help you prioritize who are those third parties, and which are those third party integrations which rank higher up, whether it is in terms of the kind of data that they transmit or process, whether it is the kind of or the level of depth in terms of integration that they have with you. So do that whole risk assessment, so to speak, and build that risk-based model so that you know that, okay, these are my maybe top 50, top 100, third party or supply chain vendors whom I need to focus on. Also, it's important to have periodic assessments, and gone are the days when you can do a dip check or a dipstick once or twice in a year. There are integrations for which you probably need consistent agile based assessments, whether it is your DevSecOps kind of story, whether it is an API security scanner within the ecosystem. I mean, there are different ways of doing it, but there needs to, and it's not just the assessment part, it's also the monitoring and the detection part as well. So it needs to cut across the protect, detect, respond layers. If I take NIST as a reference model here, so you need to have all the controls in place across the board to make sure that, okay, which whatever the integration is with those third parties or those vendors or those partners, whatever the term may be, and you're able to protect it. You're able to do those assurance mechanisms, but you're also able to respond to it in case the first two levels skip and an attacker still comes in. The whole assumed breach mindset that we all live with, I think it's important to have that response and recovery phase as well. So I would say these are some of the things that enterprises needs to look at, and don't just be driven by just a checklist or a questionnaire. Go beyond that. Look at automation. Look at other controls in terms of bringing them into your monitoring ecosystem and so on, so that I would actually say make them as part of your XDR if you have an XDR. If you have an extended detection and response, try and see if you can make them as part of your XDR in itself. So you have the visibility, you have the assurance mechanisms, you also have the protection mechanisms.
Those are some great points. And I really, like the part where you're kind of mentioning this as a continuous process, a point in time, you're only that secure then, but the threat actors, they're just constantly working away. They don't take time off. They're constantly trying to breach our environment. So I think you have some very good points there, and people should take note.
Yes. I was talking to somebody over the weekend and I was telling them that they don't have weekends.
Yeah.
They don't have weekends. They don't have holidays. They don't have weekends. They're 24/7. So then probably, I mean, do we need to shift into that? I'm not saying 100%, but yeah, we need to have mechanisms in place where we can have a continuous check into the whole process.
Yes, and you mentioned they don't have weekends and holidays, but that's probably when they're probably most active. It's a holiday here. People aren't paying attention. This is a prime opportunity.
Oh yeah.
So, what are some of the modern approaches to incident response, and specifically for emerging threats like ransomware?
Very interesting, and probably something I'm very fond of. If you ask me modern approaches, I'll say there are no modern approaches. The approaches are still conventional. The concepts, the tactics, the strategies, they're still conventional. The underlying concepts are the same. The application of it is modern. That's how I would probably put it, because you still have detection, you still have containment, you still have response, you still have recovery. These are age old concepts. How you do it and how you adapt to it in a particular threat vector. Now, in this case, because you mentioned ransomware, how you adapt these response strategies, and do you still do it sequentially, or do you skip a step, think on the fly, and you say that, okay, you know what, I need to have these decision trees. So one of the things that I have seen work very, very effectively when it comes to ransomware is around access management and asset management, and that's something I personally would say a majority of enterprises get wrong, and it is still a pain area for a lot of enterprises. When it comes to access management, why access management? Because in a case like ransomware, whether it is a malware or whether it is a threat actor, the first thing they go for is that privileged access. The moment they have privileged access, whether it is the highest level of privilege or whether it is a level or two below that, whatever level of privilege which gives them a broader access into your crown jewels and into your broader network is what they normally gun for. So if you have a robust access management in place, if you have, I'm not just saying automated, if you have automated, great, but I am emphasizing on the process in itself. If you have a robust access management process in place, and if you have a way of reviewing accesses, if you have a way of rotating accesses and things like that, the entire JML, the joiners, movers, levers in itself, if you have that, because normally a threat actor would get a low privileged user and then they start escalating their privileges. So that whole access management bit is something I have seen good organizations who have managed to respond to ransomware quickly. And I'm speaking not just in my current experience. My previous one was a consulting role. So I've seen it in that space as well. So I'm taking both those recent experiences and speaking from that. So access management definitely is something I've seen organizations do well if they are good enough in responding to ransomware. Asset management is another part. 9 out of 10 organizations don't have a visibility on what their asset ecosystem looks like. They still are either relying on the age-old ITSM concepts or the ITSA, the ITAM concepts, which don't work in today's time, where you're either spinning off an EC2 instance in the cloud, or you're probably churning up multiple instances in multiple clouds. How are you going to keep a track of the cloud ecosystem, the traditional on-premises ecosystem, your third-party ecosystem? How are you going to keep a track of your assets, which are dynamic in nature? You need to have practices and solutions which can keep a track of those dynamic shift in your broader asset ecosystem. So asset management, age-old concept, access management, age-old concept, but application of it is in today's style, which is more dynamic, more agile, and enterprises need to have a tight grip on that. The third one, the third topic which I've seen work very effectively, we used to call it, Philip, you will agree with me, we used to call it segmentation, network segmentation, or
Yep.
asset segmentation. In today's time they call it zero trust. Yes, it's a different principle altogether, but the underlying theme is still you're getting your network segmentation right. How you build your trust, whether it is I trust everyone in my internal network, or I don't trust anybody, which is what zero trust is. We can debate about that, but that whole concept of segmenting your network and making sure that a threat actor cannot jump segments easily and get to your crown jewel segment, or get to your crown jewels in itself so easily. That's another area and that also helps in your response, because when you want to contain from an incident, whether it is ransomware or any other sort of a breach, that whole segmentation works so beautifully. You can, if you know your segments, if you know that these are the segments where I've got my crown jewels, these are the ones where everyone else sits, my militarized or demilitarized zones, etc., etc. You can immediately contain and recover back fairly quick, compared to the networks that I've seen, which are, they call it a flat network, but I don't really subscribe to that term. If you have a flat network, then don't regret if somebody hits you. That's what I would say. Have those segments in place, have those underlying principles in place. So these are some of the things. Another thing which is something I've seen enterprises do well. Two more points actually. One is around backup and disaster recovery. The best of organizations who have bounced back from a ransomware are organizations who have a tried, tested, and validated backup and DR strategy. Whether you want to keep your backups offline, whether you want to keep your backups on site, your DR is on-prem, your DR is in the cloud. I don't want to get prescriptive about how you do it, but have a tried, tested, and validated backup and DR, because that's going to be a savior. That's going to be a savior when everything else falls apart. Last point that I've seen work really well is getting your executive leadership and your board of directors trained on cyber response, especially when it comes to ransomware through periodic drills. What I've typically seen as a gap is organizations having great incident response at a technical level, but the moment it escalates from the technical IR to an executive decision, which you typically call a crisis response, the moment that the incident gets escalated as a crisis and that whole thing is handed over to the crisis response, which involves your executive leadership and your board, they are not they are not ready or they're not prepared to respond to it. They have not drilled it. They don't know which template to use. They don't know what exact verbiage to speak. They don't know whom to speak to. They don't know what to do when it comes to a pay or a no pay kind of a decision making. What are the data points to be considered? Do we need to consult somebody at the country level, somebody at the government level? Those points go missing if you have not drilled it. And that's where a lot of delay happens. And the moment the delay happens, you are allowing the threat actor to amp up the pressure. And finally you give in to the pressure. So if you have your executive leadership and your board prepared enough, if you have drilled it enough with them, they know that, okay, I mean, it need not be like military grade, but they know that, okay, if a ransomware hits, my base step is 1, 2, 3, 4. These are the things I need to do. The head of corporate communication knows which template to use. The head of regulatory knows whom to speak to. The head of legal knows what all legal clauses to look at, what to say. A communication immediately goes out to all the employees saying, do not speak to any third parties, do not speak to any media if somebody comes knocking, all those things. That entire whole 9 yards is what I'm talking about. Drill it with them. It's extremely important that they are a part of the drills. And if you are a conglomerate, if you are a multinational, if you have different regions and if you have different subsidiaries, then involve your subsidiaries, involve other countries. See, because time zone differences play a role. If you have local leadership and if you have a group leadership, how do they handshake with each other? How do they communicate with each other? If you have different boards governing at the board at the group level and at the subsidiary level, how do those boards interact with each other? How do you consider your local? How do you take into consideration your local laws and regulations? All of it. So these are the five broad points I would say uh, organizations who have responded well do as a good practice. This is besides having the specialists within the organization, whether it is your threat hunters, whether it is your malware reverse engineers, whether it is a good forensics team, all of that. I mean, that's whether you have it in house, whether you source it from outside. I mean, those are different things. But I'm going in with the assumption that these things are in place. But some of the fundamentals that will help the enterprise is broadly the five things that I've just called out.
Yeah, that's some great advice and very in depth. This is going to be some valuable information for anyone listening. This has been a great interview, but now I want to kind of more pivot into the side of discussing the conference. So, as a cyber executive, what excites you about Black Hat?
See, for me, Black Hat is one of the oldest conferences going around. Right when I started off, I mean, I mean, if you asked, I mean, when I started off, there was no cyber. You know what I'm talking about. So there was probably IT security. So not even IT security. There was just firewalls and antivirus. IT security came much later.
Yep.
So when I started off, I mean, if we looked at the global conferences in this space, and Black Hat is one of them, and then it still exists. It's still credible. So for me, the biggest thing is the credibility that the conference brings, and the fact that it's been around for so long. It brings worthwhile content. It brings worthwhile speakers. It brings a wide range of industry players as well. So you get to know what are the industry developments going around. You have a platform where you can go and listen to the hardcore techies. You have a platform where you can, excuse me, you can also listen to the executives. So Black Hat covers that whole spectrum of it. And to me, that's what's exciting. The whole opportunity to come and see, excuse me, come and see what's going on in the industry, network with the peers, speak to them, listen to their experiences. There's always something to learn. So that's what my excitement is.
So what exactly specific to Black Hat MEA, what do you expect?
I think I've read about Black Hat MEA. I think it was last year when I read about it, and the fact that it's probably one of the biggest within the Black Hat ecosystem is commendable. So which means that MEA is able to attract quality speakers, quality solution partners, solution providers, quality audience, and to me that whole subset of what's happening within the MEA region, and obviously I've read about the 2030 vision of Kingdom of Saudi. So how exactly that plays in with the Black Hat ecosystem? What are the cyber developments that's going on within the country? It's interesting to understand what's going around and meet the peers, like I said.
So as far as any kind of upcoming engagements from you, any things that you have planned, as well as including Black Hat MEA, could you kind of share with our audience what they have to look forward from your contributions?
In this particular conference, I would just sum it up in one word: battle scars. If there is one thing I can bring to the table, that'll be battle scars. And by battle scars, I mean the 20, 23, 25 years of doing cyber day in, day out, seeing this whole industry evolve to where it is today, being part of some massive incident responses, massive transformations, like building the Cyber Fusion Center for Axiata Group here is one of such transformations. So it's something which consolidates all cyber capabilities. So that's what I bring to the table, the whole experience of being in these journeys and the scars that have come with it. So that's what I have got to share, and I'm looking forward to share with everybody, and also listen to others and learn from their journeys as well. So both.
Well, thank you for joining. It's been an honor having you on the podcast this episode, and I'm really excited to actually get to speak to you in person at Black Hat MEA and attend your sessions.
Likewise, Philip, thanks a lot for having me here. It's wonderful talking to you. Look forward to meeting you in person and the others. Thank you very much.
Thanks for listening. If there's a topic you want us to discuss, please send in your suggestions. Until next time.